My dear brothers and sisters, welcome to a news program unlike any other. Here we illuminate truth, dispel confusion, and focus on what matters most in these latter days. So, whether you are tuning in from the heart of Utah or joining us from around the world, your favorite news program starts now, where news meets insight and the stories of our faith unfold.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to the Mormon Newscast. It is Monday, March 3rd, 2025. I'm Radio Free Mormon. I'll be anchoring tonight's episode. I'm joined in the studio by Rebecca Biblioteca and Bill Reel. Good evening, both of you.
Hello to you, too.
Hey, we're here for the newscast, and I know that we're going to get to the news here in a second, but there may be a special announcement that Rebecca is going to be making regarding this past weekend.
It's true. I'll flip the slide here. Actually, let's see. Let me do that first. And then do you want to read the titles? Is that better?
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to read those titles. That will be better. I'm
just going to take over because it's not my week, but I'm just going to do it. That's how I roll. So, no, I just wanted to let everybody know we had Thrive, the post-Mormon, Nuanced Mormon conference that happens every year in February. It's a really big event. In fact, so big this year, it was just this last week that people couldn't get tickets. Like they were texting online, begging, does anyone have tickets? There was some black market stuff going on. And I'm happy to announce that next year, they are moving across the street to a conference center, a double in the size venue, so that hopefully a lot more of you can attend, because I'm telling you, it's so exciting to be there. The speakers were absolutely incredible for the 2 days, and we had a lot of fun. Some of the pictures I put up just very quickly. Nemo was there. There's a picture on the right where someone presented Nemo with some cowboy boots. I thought that was just so cute. He didn't know how to take them off American style, so my co-host Landon kind of helped him. You can see that there. I got to meet Bill Reel I've met him before, but we got to have breakfast with a group at Cracker Barrel, and I think we had lunch, and then I stopped in for breakfast. Anyway, just a really good time. You can see that slide of John DeLynn giving the State of the Union, which is always very interesting. Nemo, talking about Nemo no more. Anyway, and I'd like to say thank you to all of you that came up and introduced yourself and talked to me, and I think probably to Bill too. And a lot of you, while you said you liked our individual endeavors that we do, a lot of you said that you love the newscast. And I just love that a collaboration like this, people really seem to enjoy it. We really got a lot of comments on how much people appreciate the newscast, and that warms our hearts, doesn't it? I love it. So anyway, thank you everybody that came up and said hello and put it on your calendar. It's actually going to be a week earlier, so I think that makes it the 20th-ish of February next year, and it's going to be a much bigger venue, and tickets go on sale middle of the year. So pay attention and hope to see everybody there.
Thank you so much for that update, Rebecca. That was excellent. Did you want to add anything to that, Bill?
Just that I went and listened to Britt Hartley's talk. It was phenomenal. Listened to Nemo lay out the excommunication process in terms of what letters he was sending back and forth and what the correspondence looked like. Phenomenal presentation. I think Thrive is a great community for folks, and grateful that folks got a chance to enjoy that. There were a lot of folks who came from not only like northern Utah or cities away, but across the country to attend. And there were probably more than half the people I spoke to, the ones that came up to talk to me, more than half of them were from outside of Utah. So I thought that was quite impressive. And Thrive, I think, is always a good time.
That's awesome. Well, great. Thank you both for that. Going to the top stories for tonight's show. Elder Bednar claims the LDS Church not exorbitantly wealthy. And Bill Reel will be justifying that headline later on in the show. Elder Bednar claims LDS Church not exorbitantly wealthy. Remember that. Fairview mayor wants to meet with a Q15. PEW Research addresses religious shift and proselytizing mishap, otherwise known as a missionary boner. Okay, so let's go on to, hey, look it up. Okay, so the first story is mine about Elder Bednar, which is creating a lot of buzz. So what happened is that last week, about 4 days ago now, on February 27th, 2025, the church released a statement and a video defending its use of financial resources. Of course, those had been much in the news for a variety of reasons, including the lawsuit that just got dismissed in the Ninth Circuit, the one that was brought by James Huntsman against the LDS Church. And for the video, they used video of Elder Bednar from the Silicon Slopes Summit, September of 2023. Here is the statement as it appears at the church newsroom on the church's website. And it shows a hand here with a couple of little, I think those are supposed to be widow's mites. They might be. Stewardship of Tithing Funds is the title. Recent court ruling acknowledges church integrity. And here we get to the actual article itself. President Gordon B. Hinckley long kept a small widow's mite prominently displayed on his credenza. Do you think they're using that as a jab at the widow's mite report? I don't know. It's possible. That's all I'm saying. For the 15th president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it was a reminder, a constant reminder of the sanctity of the funds with which we have to deal. A lot of this is fluff, faith-promoting fluff, but, you know, they won, so they get to have their victory lap. They come from the widow. They are her offering as well as the tithe of the rich man, and they are to be used with care and discretion for the purposes of the Lord. And all that was from President Hinckley. Throughout the history of the church, the article goes on, whether in times of financial scarcity or plenty, few things are of greater concern or given greater care by church leaders than the use of consecrated tithing donations. How the Church of Jesus Christ or any faith administers its tithes and offerings is an important part of the freedoms afforded to religions as part of their sacred responsibilities. And they feel safe saying that because that's basically what the Ninth Circuit said. This was highlighted recently when the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in the United States unanimously, 11-0, looks unanimous to me, dismissed a lawsuit challenging how church funds and proceeds from investments were used for a church project. Unanimous decisions of this nature are rare and remarkable. Any decision of this nature, by the way, is rare and remarkable to be heard before the entire panel. And the judges sent a clear message in their ruling, and they quote from the opinion. Rebecca, could you read the quote from the opinion? Because I want to watch your face when you read it.
Oh, let me see. Is it after ruling : is that the quote we're talking about?
Yes, it is.
All right, there we go. No reasonable juror could conclude that the church misrepresented the source of funds for the City Creek project. That's my face. Do you need me to make it again?
Yeah, I missed it. There we go. Okay, thank you. So there we have the statement. And of course, that was the basis for this ruling, right? That was the granting of summary judgment on behalf of the church, that no reasonable juror could conclude that the church misrepresented the source of funds for the City Creek project. We may disagree with the ruling. It wouldn't be the first ruling by a judge with which I've disagreed, and yet it is the ruling. In the careful use of tithing funds, prophets act knowing they are ultimately accountable to the highest judge, the Lord Jesus Christ, for how these sacred donations are used. That stewardship weighs most heavily. I'm sorry. That's supposed to be a serious line. Let me try it again. That stewardship weighs most heavily. Yeah, it's almost a sentence fragment. I'm not positive, but I think it could be. The biblical principle of tithing, giving 10% of one's income to contribute to the Lord's work through his church, comes with both an ancient and modern promise that God will open you the windows of heaven, pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. We know where that is from. Malachi chapter 3, it's in verses 8 through 12 in there somewhere, I think. That promise is being fulfilled today. The church has been blessed with the resources needed from sacred tithing donations to support the worldwide spiritual and temporal work of helping people live the gospel of Jesus Christ, caring for those in need, inviting all to receive the gospel of Jesus Christ, and uniting families for eternity. And here's the last part, okay? Why stewards of these funds, or why stewardship of these funds, and deeper understanding of how they are cared for by the church and protected by law will ensure that the Lord's great work continues to bless millions of people throughout the world. The part that I thought that was strange about this last sentence, by the way, I understand the church gets to send out a press release. They won. They're entitled, right? I mean, I've been involved in several criminal cases of some public interest where The other side has sent out press releases on me when they won, and I've sent out press releases on them when I've won. So this is how it's played. And I understand this part. This part makes complete sense to me. The part that doesn't make sense to me is when they say, why stewardship of these funds and deeper understanding of how they are cared for? How the hell are we supposed to come to a deeper understanding of how they're cared for when you won't tell us? That's my question. So I think that kind of rang a false note in this sea of smarminess. But right there, it raises the question, how do we come to this deeper understanding when you won't tell us exactly what you're doing or even how much you have? So there is the statement. I'm going to go to this part here. At the very bottom of the statement on the church newsroom, you can see that last paragraph is what I just read. They have a video, which is, I believe it's a new video. I know it uses recycled video of Elder Bednar from the Silicon Slope Summit from September of 2023. But the video itself, I believe, is new and is also supposed to be a ringing endorsement for the church and its integrity in its care for and use of tithing funds. Before we get to that video, which will play in pieces and make comments as we go, do you two have any comments about the statement, the written statement by the church that I just got done reading?
I think the timing of the release of it is interesting. I know we were talking about it a little bit before the broadcast, and you weren't so sure, but John DeLynn was interviewing Huntsman, right, about the whole experience. He can now talk about it, disclose a lot of things. It came out literally just, I want to say like half an hour before, because I saw it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I texted it really quick over there to Julia, to John, just in case they hadn't picked up on it. Because I thought that's kind of interesting timing, to put it out right before there's going to be this 4-hour interview with about the Huntsman case. And I still think, despite the ruling, which we're all shaking our head out and kind of making faces, it moved the needle. It was in the news for a lengthy period of time. There was discovery. People did ask questions. We all did, copious amounts of podcasting on it. And I think we got a lot of information out there. And so even though the ruling didn't go the way that we wanted, the fact that he was so tenacious and just continued to just drive it forward, just so that the information remained in the public eye, he's a hero despite how the case turned out.
Very nice. Bill?
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is the church's response up to this point, again, we'll play the video in a moment. The church's response is like when, like in a fight or something, when both guys get some shots in and both guys have some sort of point to be made. But the argument, the fight ends or the argument ends with somebody getting sort of the last word or the last punch, for that matter. And then the side that won sort of brags about how it was so crystal clear that they were going to win the whole time. And if we've learned anything over the last few years with the SEC, with this lawsuit that has progressed from point to point and at this point is no longer, and then the one in regards to the SEC, that the multiple lawsuits that got combined into one, the church really doesn't have the room to be sarcastic here or to sort of throw out that it's the champ. It really has operated in very unethical ways. It's gotten in trouble for that. And one thing I made a comment to Nemo over breakfast the other day was that the letter about the SEC event that the church released, in 2 places it says the matter is closed. We consider the matter closed. And I'll just note that those who abuse and those who are the perpetrators aren't the ones who get to decide when the matter's closed. But that's the sort of attitude the church takes, is that it's the one in the wrong. It's the one that's not transparent. It's the one that's hoarding wealth, which we'll get into. It's the one that is saving all this money and barely spending any of it. And then it makes everyone else out to be the bad guy and pretends like it's the cleanest thing in the room when it is the one that's misbehaving.
Mm. Very good. Yeah, I was writing that thought down when you said it. Well said. I mean, yeah, they're going to take a victory lap here, but in the context, right, the historical context of having their pants pulled down and paraded before the public in the SEC order from February of 2023, which is just 2 years ago, right? Just over 2 years ago now. For them to come out and, take this victory lap does expose them to a comparison. But then they went a bridge too far. A bridge too far. Because the statement, okay, we get it. But then they added the video of Elder Bednar. By the way, A Bridge Too Far, great movie, and timely enough, guess who starred in it? Better question is who didn't star in it. But over there on the right of Sean Connery's shoulder, who do you see?
Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Recently passed away.
Unfortunate. Yeah.
And more recently discovered. Yeah. Okay. And this is The Bridge Too Far. Elder Bednar. That should be his middle name. Elder David A. The Bridge Too Far. That's what the A stands for. Elder David A. Bridge Too Far Bednar. I like it because he's speaking at the Silicon Slope Summit. And what we have here is there was a report that was done on it at the time back in September of 2023. Apostle describes the global Church of Jesus Christ at Silicon Slope Summit. Talk about a mixing of God and mammon. And here is the video. Now, the video itself that the church put up, this is The Bridge Too Far, is just 2.5 minutes long, but we will break it up as we go through. So, Bill, do you have that? And are you able to hit the play and I'll go, can I go cut and you'll cut?
Yep. Here we go.
You're getting a lot of heat for people telling you how to spend the money of the church. How do you think about that, or how can others really understand?
Right now.
Yep.
Okay. I'm not sure who this guy is, who's the host, right? And I don't know why he's dressed like that, but he looks like a mime with an allergy for makeup. He's a mime with a makeup allergy. What is that outfit? Is that
it's a tech summit? Yeah, everybody really edgy, cool, tech entrepreneur. Everybody was there, and I can't remember his name either. But he's the bomb.
This is what all the fashionable millionaires are wearing nowadays.
Exactly. And I know people that went to it. I got footage from it. You know, when I knew Elder Bednar was going to speak, to see if he'd say something interesting. But let me just say for everyone to make it clear, there was no music playing during the summit. It was just a conversation back and forth. So that emotion elevating music that's going to affect all of us, that was added later.
Very good. And once again, this is produced by the church. This is a part of the montage. And we are stopping it regularly to make comments, even about clothing, mainly because we want to make sure that it's very clear and obvious that we are using this in a fair use manner and not just playing the whole thing at once, okay? Which could be objected to by certain parties. So
is this a tech summit? Yeah, is this a tech summit of Mormons, or is this a tech summit that's just a world sort of technology conference?
It's a world sort of technology conference, and Elder Bednar got to show up, which
was unusual, everybody thought. And it is Ryan Smith. I'm sorry, I couldn't even remember that. He owns the Jazz. Like I said, he's everything here.
Ryan.
And it was entrepreneurs and tech companies, Silicon Slopes in the Lehigh area and Draper of Utah. I mean, it rivals anywhere else. It's pretty important. And so everybody was really surprised. Why is an apostle speaking here? Because it is not LDS. It's very much commercial business. I guess maybe that explains why he's speaking there.
I know, it's like when the apostles in the endowment reveal themselves and their true identity as apostles of the Lord Jesus Christ. And here comes Elder Bednar revealing himself as one of the board of directors of like the richest company in America.
Yeah.
Bill, did you have something to say?
Scale of this.
Let me address two things. We have 4 overarching responsibilities. The mission of the church is to help people learn about and live the teachings of Jesus Christ, to share that message with the world, to strengthen and unite families, and to care for the poor and the needy. Now, we do this all over the world.
Thank you very much. Okay. So, of course, he's not going to answer the question. And the question is not really put to him very, very strongly at all by this individual. In fact, he frames it. Ryan Smith, was it? Bill, is Ryan a donator to the show?
I don't know that. I doubt it.
Okay. Why don't you donate to the show, Ryan? That's what I want to know. So the question is this about poor Ryan. He's given him a softball, because he's framing the question initially as to Elder Bednar about people out there who want to try and tell you how to spend your money, right? That's the biggest softball in the world. How easy is that to respond to? Why should people be telling me how to spend my money? Now, he goes off, of course, to talk about the fourfold mission of the church, and it's globally, and this is where all this money is going. But if you'll play a little bit more, you will see and we'll explain in detail afterward what it is that he's saying and how it is that he's trying to, I think, give a false impression about the church's finances by what he's saying.
So in terms of scope, that's the answer. The people who want to tell us how to spend the money, I would just emphasize one undergirding principle. The assets of the church are primarily income consuming. They are not income producing.
Got it. Okay. Did you hear that? This, I think, is the soundbite that has the most buzz going on because it's the most flagrant misrepresentation, I think, almost imaginable. But when Elder Bednar says that the assets of the church are primarily income consuming and not income producing, and the whole music and the whole orchestration did the swell and then the breakaway and the silence when he said that to emphasize it with dramatic music. What are your thoughts about what he said and the way it was presented?
I just can't believe he has the nerve to say that out loud. And the only thing I can think of that he's only referring to the religious arm of the organization because it is a corporation sold with a religious arm. And that's how it's framed in all of its, documentation. So if he's referring to the religious arm, perhaps that might be true, but there's no way that anyone could make that statement knowing about Ensign Peak, knowing, about all the stocks, all of that. I also have to laugh because remember how there was only a threefold mission of the church the entire time that all of us were growing up? It was
growing up.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Growing up, even recently, it was proclaim the gospel. It was proclaim the gospel, redeem the dead, and perfect the saints. Only, in the last however long have they added, oh, that's right. We better take care of people. So now it's a fourfold mission. But for a long time, it was only a threefold mission. So I'm just stunned the wiggle words because everyone knows that that's not accurate.
So now we don't have to play through all of this, but right now they're going to show all the different meeting houses because he's going to talk about the different assets that the church has, the income consuming assets, right, Bill?
Yeah. Can I, by the way,
please?
Can I jump in and say two of the assets he will not mention is all of the money in an investment account that numbers somewhere in the range of $150 billion that collects interest or income based on those investments going up. And the other asset he doesn't mention is the tithe payers themselves, which are an asset to the church. And I know it's not like a business asset that you mark down on your tax return, but if you're going to count all the things that bring you in money, you sure as hell should count the donors and the investment fund. And then I'll just note here, because you pointed it out at the beginning, the title on the little clips of what we're going to talk about tonight, the title for this one was Church Denies That It's Exorbitantly Wealthy. And all I'll say there is that the church, Elder Bednar seems to be making the argument that $250 billion, while being considered a mass amount of hoarded wealth, he's saying that's not true. We need every penny of this to be able to function. And you're going to see the reason here in a moment for why he lays it out. Once you hear that reason, he's saying every penny of this is necessary. We are not hoarding more than what we're going to need.
That is the implication.
Yes. Okay, are you ready to play that?
Yes, sir, please.
20,000 meeting houses and facilities. They're all paid for when they're dedicated. All of the utilities are paid for. They're not on a plate or collecting money in local congregations. That's all done.
What is this? It's reflexive, isn't it? The Mormon disdain for passing a collection plate as being inferior in some way ethically to requiring 10% of a person's income in order to go to the celestial kingdom. It's reflexive. And I was kind of surprised to hear him talk in such a dismissive way about a commonly accepted practice of gathering donations among many of his Christian brothers and sisters. Any thoughts from you?
I feel like he's showing disdain for people that give out of the goodness of their heart. And still, instead, what he's saying is, there's punitive action that's taken against you as far as removing privileges if you don't tithe.
Anything from you, Mr. Real?
Also, he's making the reference that ward buildings and stake buildings get paid for in cash on day one, and they're not income producing, but that's baloney. I'll say that. Those ward buildings do bring in money. They house tithing paying members. They're built with the intention of, we're only going to build a building that can service this many people. We won't build that building until there's enough people there to support it. And once those people come in, the budgets that wards have versus the amount of money the average ward sends back to Salt Lake City, it's crazy. You spend $7,000 a year in terms of like budget on things, and then you end up getting back in, whatever it is, $340,000 per building, and then you act like the building was a loss for you. And in terms of how Mormonism does business, that's just not true.
Right, and the temples are a more direct connection, but you're right about the chapels too. And I don't want to take away your thought because you shared it with me before the show, Rebecca. Do you want to repeat that now?
Yeah,
about
I guess
how temples are actually income producing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I take huge exception to that. And I've talked about this. It's actually my co-host Landon who kind of brought this up, that temples are income producing. In order to set foot through the door, you have to have already given and continue to give 10% of your income. So in my mind, they do produce income for the church. When new temples are built, there's a whole bunch of publicity trying to get the members, get your recommend. What does it mean to get your recommend? In some cases, you may be paying back tithing. You're promising to pay tithing now and continue to pay. So the idea that it's not income producing, it started from somebody probably handing a chicken to the bishop's storehouse. How do you get from a chicken to almost $300 billion, as John DeLynn reported at Thrive? Somewhere along the line, income had to be produced.
One egg at a time.
That's right.
All right. So if we can just play a little bit more here, once again, chopping it up for fair use sake.
The tithes that the members of the church pay all over the world. But you've got fixed costs in the maintenance, the utilities, all of those things for all of those buildings. 315 temples in operation.
Okay, can we stop here for a second?
Design, being renovated.
Okay, notice that what Elder Bednar is doing is what I saw somebody else doing this past week, and I don't have to get into who that was. You'll see it often enough, where statistics are used not to inform, but in order to occlude, okay? He's flooding the space with statistics that have nothing to do with really what they're talking about or answering the question. But he's flooding with statistics to make sure everybody knows how big the church is, how many buildings they have, how many temples are out there, so that they understand that all of these income consuming assets, as he's just described them, are going to be consuming all the church's money. It's like Bill said, the implication is so strong that it's virtually an outright claim that the church just really doesn't have that much more money than it needs to meet its debts. All right, ready to play a little bit more?
Renovated or under construction. 4 major institutions of higher education. You don't have to be an accountant to figure out. Those are some big dollars. So when people say, well, what do you do with all that money? Well, there's an episode in the Old Testament.
Can you stop there for a second? No, you don't have to be an accountant to know that that requires a lot of money. But we're sure as hell not going to tell you how much money. This is one of the things you have to always understand and keep reminding yourself of. He is not going to tell you how much money the church takes in tithing every year. He is not going to tell you how much money the church has in investment savings in the bank, technically the EPA. He's not going to tell you any of that. All he's going to do is say, we have all of these buildings, all of these assets that require money, and we're going to pay that money, and we have to pay it all the time. And these are fixed expenses, right? The electricity, oh my gosh, it's a fixed expense. We've got to pay this. And now he's going to go into the Bible, and he's going to wax rhapsodic about the story of Joseph in Egypt, right? With the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine. I don't know. maybe there's another church out there that uses this story more than the Mormons. If so, I'm not aware of what church that is. But you hear it all the time in Mormonism. Maybe Ryan Smith is hearing it for the first time. I don't know. Maybe he's a Mormon. He's heard it a bunch too. But yeah, the 7 years and the 7 years. So what are you saying? You're saying we need to have something in reserve, but he will never tell you how much they have in reserve, because if he told you how much they have in reserve, everybody would say, why do you have that much in reserve?
Can I just, the BYU thing too, the schools, the church has done its research. It knows what the schools bring back in loyal membership, for instance, the AJ Dibansta, they paid him umpteen $1 million, but they know what they're getting by making that investment. When you invest in a church school, BYU, Idaho, et cetera, you recognize that, yes, you're subsidizing on some level some of the cost of some of the students, but you realize that having kids go to BYU ends up with a certain kind of Mormon when they're all done, and they end up being better tithe payers, more faithful and loyal for the rest of their life. It also allows you to control the training of critical thinking skills and which way you do it when the kids show up at your own school. It's not, he's making it sound like we just do this kind thing of building a school and everybody comes for free and we get nothing out of it. That's just not true.
Right.
Well, and I think we're forgetting about Canadian tithing. Do we all remember this? The Canadian tithing scandal? That's why I laugh when they said you don't have to be an accountant, because I don't know if everyone knows that story, but it was a faithful Canadian accountant who was looking into corporations and how they do charitable giving. And he was so proud of his religion that he thought he would look them up, just on a day, just on a whim. It took him 2 seconds to recognize what was happening as far as funneling tithing money from saints in Canada to institutions like BYU. It was a way of laundering it out of the country, because there are strict laws that these charitable giving has to stay in the country and benefit the people there, and this is a faithful LDS member who was just trying to be proud of his church and discovered it. So on the surface, what Elder Bednar is saying, there's a lot of wiggle words that he's using, and it's not as it appears.
Two things. First off, I think that to the extent that Bill was talking about BYU paying that money to the new basketball players, Dibansta, is that his name?
AJ Dibansta, yeah.
Yeah. I think that they would want to differ and say, no, BYU didn't do that, but there were other, supporters of the school to the side and not doing it.
Yeah,
by
there's no communication from one side to the other either.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for making that clear. And then you were saying something else that you were talking about there, Rebecca, a second ago that I was going to correct you on. But
oh, of course. Yes, please correct.
What were you talking about?
We were talking about Nigel Kenneth, the Canadian tithing whistleblower.
Oh, right. And the only thing I was going to say about that is I think that there was not a law in Canada that was being violated, but it was something that they were upset about and thinking about now passing a law. It was like an understanding that that's the way it should be, but not actually a law being violated by it, right?
Right. I think Australia and Canada came out about the same time.
Yeah.
And, I kind of figured out who the whistleblower was and talked to him. But yeah, everyone assumed when they paid their tithes, it would be for the Canadian saints right there in their area. And instead it was and what's really funny is in order to be able to support BYU with Canadian money, they had to make sure there were Canadian students there at BYU. And the ratio was really low. It's a very interesting thing to look into.
Very good. Thank you so much. Okay, so playing on a little bit more with this video, the video that will never end.
Well, there's an episode in the Old Testament about Joseph. He interpreted a dream for the Pharaoh that there were 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And in the years of plenty, you better prepare for the years of famine. So people want to speculate about the size of the reserve and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, can you stop
$1 billion assisting poor needy people all over.
What's that?
What do you mean people want to speculate about it? Why do they want to speculate about it, Elder Bednar? Why is this guy letting him get away with murder up there? Why don't you just tell us? People only speculate in the absence of knowledge. You're the one who has the knowledge. And now he's going to look down and chastise gently those who speculate about how much money the church has. People want to speculate about how much money the church has. Well, that's because you won't tell us. And the very fact that you won't tell us makes us think that you've got a lot more than you want us to think you do. And now the widow's mite has shown that you really do have a lot more than you want us to think that you do. And that's the whole SEC fiasco, trying to hide it from the government, trying to hide it from the members. And he continues here in a summit at Silicon Slopes, where he's going to be interviewed and he's not going to be pushed on this issue. I know it's glad handing and it's probably not, point counterpoint or something like that, but still, it would be nice for someone who has the ability to ask him a question, to ask him a real question.
And by the way, it's obvious that when he's asked the question, he has this answer ready to go. This is not a simple answer that somebody just winging it would get. He was asked a question. He had time to prep. People behind the scenes orchestrated a beautifully well articulated answer. And then, like you pointed out, Rebecca, and then he's still not good enough. We got to add music to it. We got to fool people emotionally. So anyway.
By the way, that line that has everybody upset, and that we'll be talking about a little bit more here in a second, after this video's over, that was scripted. Most of this is scripted. Maybe the questions were scripted. I'm not saying they were, but these answers are obviously scripted. He came very prepared. And that line about primarily the assets of the church are income consuming instead of income producing, right? Total script. That wasn't said offhand or off the cuff. He meant to say it that way. And he meant to say it that way to give it the implication that is not true.
Yeah. Also, too, the 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine, you can literally use that forever if you want to. I mean, it's sort of this freebie explanation that any institution religious that has this much money within Christianity could make this argument. Now, by the way, there are only 1, 2, maybe 3 institutions in Christianity that have anywhere near this amount of money. But you could use this $293 billion in the market. The church could cash all of that out right now, put it into bank CDs earning 5%, 4%, whatever they're getting at the moment. If you're not getting 4%, folks, you probably look around. They've got so much. I mean, how many years of church operation? And then also when stuff does hit the fan and we end up in a recession or heaven forbid a depression, it doesn't go from 8 billion coming in a year to nothing. That's not how it works. Maybe it gets cut to 2/3. Maybe they only bring 2/3 in that they were bringing in before. Maybe it's only half, but never does it go to zero. And if things get so bad that it goes to zero, you probably can't get that money out of the stock market anyway. So this is a pretend game where you create an excuse that would work for anything.
Yeah, it's a wooden tool. Absolutely.
And I was going to say, I think that story that they use over and over is disingenuous, because do they help in times of famine? I mean, I think about my lifetime alone. We've had several different economic, huge crises, that I've had to live through as an adult, as most of us had, 9/11, the mortgage crisis, COVID, you just get hit over and over. And it seems like each time, wards have said, we will not pay mortgages. We will not. I know people help. People always help. But institutionally, it seems like, are they really helping in times of famine? We've had those times in the last several decades, and I'm not sure that I've seen it. The way people think there would be help. I really think some people think that when the chips are down, they're just going to hand you all your tithing money back and say, here, good and faithful servant, we've saved this for you. No, I really think some people think that, and that's not going to happen. If anyone's ever had to go ask for assistance from the church or any kind of help, it's a roulette. It's a roulette situation. I know of people that did get assistance. I know of people that were turned away. So you might want to rethink that times of famine and what that means for you.
I'm thinking some of your thoughts tonight too, Rebecca, as well as Bill's, because COVID, we have to say this, and we have to put this in historical context. We just went through a world pandemic called COVID just a few years ago. It was vast. It was ginormous. Everybody's watching this probably lived through it, so you know what I'm talking about. It's that recent. And yet, how much did the church dip into the EPA account to help out with COVID? Answer, to my understanding, zero. None. That doesn't mean they didn't make any kind of contributions, but we'll go over what that means exactly here in a second so that I can try and present to you the reality of the situation so you can understand how badly Elder Bednar is seeking to mislead. And the church, through his video and this video they produced, are seeking to mislead the membership.
Just a note, too, having served as a bishop, helping people who came in for need, whenever I would go to meet with the stake president, he was constantly hearing from above him, like, make your bishop, get your bishops to reduce on some level. Like, don't, maybe we do it for a little while. Maybe we really push for people to do these extra services, the extra things that sort of gets them to feel shame and back away from needing church help. And so even the good leaders, you mentioned leader roulette, even the good leaders at the bishop or stake presidency level who are willing and wanting to, who recognize like the church has got plenty of money and this is the poor person in my stake, we need to be helping them. Constantly at the area 70 and above is the pressure to rein that in. It is, as a bishop or stake president, you constantly feel that the people above you want you to do less welfare for the saints in your ward and stake who are having a hard time.
Yeah, it's a losing proposition. And on Mormonish, we did an episode with a faithful ward executive secretary and clerk and financial planner. And he explained, think about this. You're told if you pay your tithing, you're going to be blessed. You're going to be cared for. The church's mission, as Bill just said, is to get you self-reliant as soon as possible, meaning we are not going to help you long-term. There is nothing set up in the church to help you long-term. And that sort of juxtaposition leads to people continuing to pay their tithing, which puts them in this downward spiral of, financial problems and debt, relying on the church. The church is not set up for long-term help at all. And I'm even looking in the comments, sometimes no help to small families, to children. They're not set up to do that, although they put a face on as if they are, but that's not usually the truth. People help. I will say that again. Ward members are generous. Ward members help. Ward members take up collections. Ward members care for each other. But institutionally, it is not set up to do that.
You want to play a little bit more, Bill? By the way, excellent comments, both of you. And thank you for your insights about your guest, Rebecca, and about your time as a bishop, Bill.
About the size of the reserve and all that kind of stuff. $1 billion assisting poor and needy people all over the world annually. $1 billion for education. And it's necessary to maintain the mission of this church.
We did it again.
Which is to bless the lives of individuals and families.
So you feel good
there?
about.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, there's $1 billion for education, basically. Yeah, a year. All of this comes out of the tithing, the new tithing that's coming in. I'll show that here in just a second. But this is what you need to know to understand what it is he really means. That's why they don't have to dip into the EPA, which has been growing radically in the last several years. Like you said, it's up to, I think it's 186 billion, 193. It's hard to keep track of actually because it's growing almost as fast as the national debt. But that's what he's talking about, okay? So they get $7 billion a year. $1 billion goes to, they can pay their bills out of what they get in new tithing every year. What's left over goes into the big fat account and it just keeps growing and growing, tax-free, low overhead, and it's just absolutely amazing. Okay, so if you have any comments about that, please voice them or you can continue to play.
Where you're at, you feel like it's prudent and wise, and
I think it would be imprudent and unwise not to have a reserve.
Okay, yeah, that's a real hardball question. So you think it would be prudent and wise to do that? Is that right, Elder Bednar? Yeah, this guy's got a future in journalism. He probably doesn't need it. He's got a past in whatever it is he's made, a millionaire, whatever technology. So good for him. Good for him. But it's just like, come on, really? This is nothing but glad handing.
Well, I would ask this question to Elder Bednar. How do you feel about most LDS members not being able to have a personal reserve because they're paying tithing?
Yeah,
Most
because of you, by the way.
Don't
because
have
of
a
you,
great
Elder
personal
Bednar.
reserve because they've done that their entire lives.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you know a lot of people like that.
Mm-hmm. I do.
I know somebody like that.
Yep.
I'm one of those people like that.
My
Well,
parents
I can't
certainly were.
retire because of Elder Bednar.
Yeah.
Of course, he'll say, I can't retire either.
There's no such thing as retiring anymore. No, my parents paid into all the funds, and I'm guessing some of our viewers can relate to that. They not only paid tithing, they paid into all the funds, and they also they paid whatever they paid in tithing to fast offering. So when and they were wonderful, charitable people thinking that they were doing the right thing and the money was going to help people. But when I think about it, that's 30% of your income for life, your working life.
Mhm.
That's quite a bit, And of course, they passed away thinking that all the money went for good. They had no idea about the fund or anything like that. I do, and I have some very
God
strong
bless them.
feelings about that.
Yeah.
But they really thought they were doing the right thing.
What I would say to Elder Bednar, if I were sitting in that seat across from him, I would say, Elder Bednar, I have the faith not to pay tithing. See if he wants to argue with that proposition. That could be fun. Okay, so let's go on. And that's basically it. That's the clip, right?
Yep.
So things to know, and we've kind of talked about these already, so this will go by really quick. Elder Bednar is talking about two different things, so he doesn't take pains to be clear. The first thing is the annual income of the church through tithes, which is around $7 billion. It may be up to 8 by now, but we'll just say $7 billion. We'll be conservative. The second thing is the Ensign Peak investment account, which has around $293 billion. Is that 293 or 193? No, 293 total. 293 billion. Okay. So those are the two things he's talking about, but he doesn't make clear which he's talking about when. So you got one thing, 7 billion, that's annual tithing, new funds coming in. And over there on the right is the $293 billion EPA investment account. You can see the difference. So the 7 billion annual tithing, this pays for all church expenses, schools, churches, and when I say schools, colleges, churches, temples, the works. Then what is left over after paying expenses goes where? Because they have more than they need for expenses. That extra money goes into the EPA, but money never comes out. Money goes into the EPA. But so far, as far as we know, money's never come out with the two exceptions known of the City Creek Mall and Beneficial Life bailout. So that's David A. Bednar and his quote, which I tried to get word for word, and I think I did, when he said the assets of the church are primarily income consuming, not income producing. David A. Bednar, 4 Pinocchios on that one. And what I did was I went to the widow's mite, and we'll get to that here in a second. But first, Elder Bednar is not saying how much the church makes every year in tithing. He could. He knows. He's never going to say it. And Elder Bednar is not saying how much the church has in reserves. I think he knows. Maybe he doesn't. But Widow's Mite has a pretty good idea. Why not? If Elder Bednar revealed this information, he wouldn't be able to get away with playing these word games. So it starts to look intentional. When you see all this information that he knows, he's not telling, and then he's not being careful to distinguish what he's talking about when he's answering questions in order to give a false impression. That's why it looks like he's playing word games. We're going to the Widow's Mite now, which is the wonderful consortium of people who are experts in the area of finance and have dug through the available information that the church has put out and has been revealed in different, perhaps newspapers or magazine articles or whatever. They've put all this stuff together, and they have got a really good bead on the church and how much it has. And this is what they say. This is the report on the state of wealth of the church for 2024. So this is the most recent that they have. And here are the two slides. The first one is on the left, okay? And at the end of 2024, the church has about $206 billion. $206 billion. Now that $206 billion is investments that are not, repeat, not those other investments that Elder Bednar was talking about, okay? This is the stuff that's like in the stock market or other places. But on the right, you can see still under 2024, you see the same color green there, and it shows that same $206 billion, okay? Then on top of that, you have the operating assets, right? Which are the ecclesiastical buildings, the welfare farms, the BYU system, all 4 colleges, okay? Those are all of those assets. And those assets total 87 billion by themselves, about 87 billion. Put together, you come to the grand total of $293 billion. I think it might be over 300 actually by now, but this is what's in the Widow's Mite report. So you can see that even if Elder Bednar were talking about church assets in his mind, the church assets are not primarily the investments that the church has. In fact, the church has about twice as many non-church related assets as it does church assets or church related assets. 87 billion for the operating assets versus the 208, but it's more than twice as much. So there's no way I think that could be considered primarily the way that Elder Bednar talked about. Remember what he said was, the assets of the church are primarily income consuming, not income producing. So I just don't understand. I'll be open to any kind of explanations you might have. I actually came up with one myself as a possibility for how it is he's trying to justify saying this outrageously misleading thing. The assets of the church are not primarily income consuming. The assets of the church are primarily income producing. It's the opposite of what Elder Bednar said by a big margin, as we just saw in the graphs. When Elder Bednar says assets of the church, now this is my speculation. When Elder Bednar says assets of the church, he may be distinguishing between the two investments in his head and be referring only to those assets that are ecclesiastical in nature, i.e. only the blue bar. In other words, if he's saying it and in his head, he's thinking only about the blue bar, not about the blue bar and the green bar, just the blue bar, then within that blue bar, then maybe those assets of the church are primarily income consuming. Maybe. But you have to go a long way and around the block to find the justification to try and give him an excuse to be not lying about this. So I said, when Elder Bednar says assets of the church, he may be distinguishing between the two investments in his head and be referring only to those assets that are ecclesiastical in nature, i.e. only the blue bar. But if this is what Elder Bednar is doing, and he would have to be doing something like this in order to avoid lying, please explain if I'm wrong about this, okay? He should explain his definitions to the audience in order to avoid inadvertently misleading them. And then we were going to play it again, but we're not going to do that because once again, we want to be very careful about use of this. We want this information to stay up for everybody to be able to see it together with our commentary on it. So let me see if I think that was the end. Oh, no. That was the part about people telling the church how to spend the money. I'll make this last point, then you can throw in and we'll go to the next story, everybody. Nobody is telling the church how to spend its money. But a lot of people, when they hear the church has almost $300 billion in reserves, think the church should maybe dip into those reserves to help people out. Why should anyone have to tell apostles of Jesus Christ that the poor and needy should be ministered to? And as I was pondering about this episode before it started, the thought came to me and the scripture came to my mind of John chapter 3, verse 10, where in a similar situation, Jesus is talking alone with Nicodemus. Nicodemus being a member of the Sanhedrin, one of the teachers of the people, one of the masters of the people in Israel. And he was asking questions that Jesus was chiding him, saying, any idiot knows this. And how can you possibly hold the position that you hold and not know this? And even as Jesus said it to Nicodemus, I would say it to Elder Bednar. Jesus answered and said unto him, art thou a master of Israel and knowest not these things? Elder Bednar, when it comes to having billions and billions and hundreds of billions of dollars in reserve and making the decision to not use those or even half of those or part of those, some of it, to help out the poor and needy, art thou an apostle of Jesus Christ and knoweth not these things? That's what it should be used for and not just sitting there and growing cold and alone and dark. Those are my thoughts. Rebecca, Bill.
I have one thought. I have an assignment for everybody. Go and read the scripture about the widow's mite and read the scriptures that precede it. There are scholars that feel it's been completely misinterpreted, that it actually is trying to say, how dare you ask a widow for her mite when you have wealthy priests, you have wealth in a church. So I read the scriptures around it in context with punctuation different and emphasis different than the way that they say it now. And I can see this. It's possible that we've gotten it wrong the entire time. The story of the widow's mite may be shame on you. You need to care for the widow and not ask the widow for her last mite. So go read it, everybody. Tell me what you think.
Okay. Thank you.
I forget what the TV evangelist's name is, but he gets confronted by an interviewer who's asking how he could purchase a private jet for himself. And I mean, he's the way he responds to it is he just wants to deflect and not really address it. And he sort of says that he doesn't want to sit in first. He doesn't want to sit in on a public transportation on a plane because everyone's possessed by demons. And I can't remember what the answer is that he gives Cole, but it's sort of like, how dare you ask me these questions? And I'm just telling you, Mormon leaders are wealthy. Not only do they have whatever the stipend is, but they have all of their expenses, healthcare, car, housing, all of that's paid for. So whatever the stipend is just put it right into the savings. Put it right into the savings or invest it elsewhere. These are not poor men. These are wealthy men. And why do believers think these guys are any different than the TV evangelist who's grifting you? Because that's what these guys are doing. Now, I'll just say, go ahead, RFM.
Kenneth Copeland.
Kenneth Copeland was the guy.
I looked it up. I could not remember it. I could see his face.
Yeah. By the way, I think everyone should watch that because, no offense, but Bednar has a little bit of that sort of snarkiness to him at times. I'll say this. There's the thing from President Nelson where I'm going to put it up on the screen here, where he tells the people of Africa to pay tithing. That's the way to get out of poverty, which is ridiculous. Okay, we've got Elder Anderson saying we're not a wealthy people. We want to help. As a church, we want to help, but we're not a wealthy people. BS. President Monson back in 2018. I answered that the church is not wealthy, but that we follow. And then he goes on to continue the quote. These guys are filthy rich. They've got tons of money. And then when I look at that Nelson quote, notice this was in 2012. Mm-hmm. And they were estimating the church had 40 billion then.
Mm-hmm. They were way low.
And now 293 billion. At what point do these leaders tell the people that they are wealthy beyond those members understanding that paying tithing won't get you out of poverty? In fact, it'll put you further into poverty. And at the very least, start admitting you're at least a wealthy church, because that one, I don't think there's any way out of it.
I think that I've got it all wrong, and that Malachi is actually saying that if you pay a faithful tithing, then God will open the windows of heaven upon the church and pour the church out a blessing so great that there shall not be room to receive it. I think you have to move some commas around to understand it correctly, Rebecca.
It's always important to move the commas. I do it all the time.
So that's that story. What is the next story that's up? Is this yours, Rebecca? I think it is.
It might be mine, and it's completely related to your story, I feel. Absolutely, because we're going to be talking about temple building, which, as I said, in my opinion, temples are completely income producing assets for the church, I think. So there was just 2 days ago, this is kind of breaking news, actually, 3 days ago, an article in the Dallas Morning News. They do a really good job reporting on Fairview. And the title of the article was Fairview Mayor Pleads with Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to Avoid a Lawsuit. The mayor said he'd go to Utah if it means he can meet with church leaders about the height of the proposed McKinney, Texas temple. Now, why should someone involved in a very important negotiation have to go somewhere to talk to somebody that is a decision maker? This has been the problem the whole time, and I think this happens in almost every other city that we've dealt with. The lawyers are the ones on the ground interacting with the elected city officials, town officials, and nobody else. An area rep may make a statement or talk to them. A stake president may talk to them. But like Mayor Henry Lesnar of Fairview, he's like, well, I want to talk to somebody who could make a decision. I want to run it up the chain. Why won't someone like that come to my town, look me in the eye, shake my hand, and we talk this through? Of course, we all know the answer, right? In fact, I always laugh in all the different towns. They say, well, maybe we can write a letter. Is there an address we could write to Salt Lake? We're like, no, not even a faithful member can write a letter. If you do, it trickles back down to your local leader so they can deal with you, right? So this was very interesting, this article. Here is a picture of the first proposed McKinney, Texas temple, 173 feet, 44,000 square feet footprint there, compromise, a mediation, much smaller, 120, but still doesn't meet the zoning codes. And now the town is being threatened by a lawsuit, which is why that title says he'd like to talk to somebody. Maybe if they talk, they can avoid this. If they can each explain to each other, what's going on, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, especially among the faithful LDS. So the mayor put out this statement, and this statement was quoted in the Dallas Morning News, but I happened to get the statement hot off the presses right when he gave it. And I'm just going to read this because this is almost a statement that anybody in any of these towns could have made. They've all expressed these kind of sentiments to all of us that watch, the temple building. So the mayor says, as you might have read about a month ago in the media, the local attorneys representing the LDS Church have again threatened to sue the town of Fairview. Insert any town's name there, right? This just happens to be Fairview. And take this temple building back to the original 65-foot building height. That's the walls, with a spire on top reaching up to 174-foot height. The agreement that was made between the town and the church in November 2024 was for the LDS folks to bring the mediated smaller building design plans with a 35-foot building height and a tower going up to 120 feet through our planning department in mid-January. And we've talked about this, the democratic process of taking it to planning and zoning and taking it to the town council. This mediated plan was preliminary and unanimously determined to be acceptable to our council. He's explaining again what happened. The new plan should have gone before our Planning and Zoning Commission in February and on to the council in March. Instead, the church has not submitted the new plan, but instead chose to again threaten the town with a lawsuit. The town is working to get this process back on track, which is what they want to do. And again, the mayor said, we may have agreed in mediation, but we can't control our citizens' opinion, what a planning and zoning board might vote for. They don't have that kind of control like the church. You can just say, do this, think this way, and the members fall in line. He goes on to say, one thing that I am asking for is to have a meeting with someone from the LDS Church in Salt Lake who is a decision maker. Like you would think in any negotiation, right? If Walmart comes to your town and wants to build, they're probably going to send somebody pretty important to talk to your citizens, talk to your town council, talk to your mayor. And that's respectful to do that. That shows how you value the process, you value the town. And if the temple truly is the most important building, as they keep saying, why are they not sending a most important person to try to talk to everybody? That's my thought there. Let's see, who wants to talk to someone who is a decision maker. As the highest elected official in Fairview, I have never met with any decision maker from the church. I have only met and talked with LDS attorneys. And it's interesting because the church keeps putting out in all their statements, they won't meet with our attorneys. Our attorneys have asked to meet one-on-one. They keep turning down a meeting with our attorneys. And the mayor is saying, we've talked to your attorneys. No offense, RFM. We would like to talk to some of the decision makers that are higher up in this important process. If they will not come to Fairview, says the mayor, I am happy to go to Salt Lake City for a meeting. He's happy to go to the source. If they're not going to come to him, he will go to them. I am not aware of anyone in the LDS decision-making hierarchy in Salt Lake City ever coming to Fairview to talk with any of our community leaders. And he's not wrong. No one has come. The area rep is there representing. The stake president weighs in. The attorneys talk, but there has not been anyone else who would be considered a decision maker that has addressed any of the elected officials or the town, anybody in Fairview. All right, let's continue reading. It has been almost a year since the LDS Church surprised our community with their plan to build a gigantic building on the residential side of our town. It is time that the LDS decision makers learn about our town. And that actually is one thing they really want to do. They want to explain Fairview to the church so the church can understand who they are. And that is a legitimate request, I think. We want to explain, they learn about our town, why we think it's special, why thousands of our residents are so passionate about wanting the LDS Church to follow our zoning laws, and the efforts made over the years to protect our environment and the character of our town. So he's just asking for a chance to explain Fairview to the LDS Church and then to arrive at an agreement. His final thought is, I am ready to travel to Salt Lake to meet with someone who is a decision maker in the LDS hierarchy to see if we can come to a common understanding that will avoid a lawsuit. Henry Lesner, Mayor, Town of Fairview, Texas. And I have a little graphic there where Henry Lesner is on an airplane and he says Salt Lake City or bust. So he's willing to do that. Let's look each other in the eye. Let's shake a hand. Let's sit down. Let's talk this over. Do you guys have any thoughts about this statement and his request to meet with somebody, even being willing to come to Salt Lake City?
Well, it makes sense he wants to talk to somebody, but you know something? I think it makes more sense, and it's politically savvy for him to make this a public statement, because now he's putting out there his version of the way things went down, and that he's never been able to talk to a decision maker and everything about the church. And we had this deal and the church welched on the deal. And sorry to all our Welsh listeners, but they welched on the deal. And now, now we're trying to get it back on track, because here they're going to try and sue us, and I'll go to Salt Lake City. I'm so committed. I think that is a very good move as a public statement. And the fact it's public, I don't know, maybe it'll get the church to move on it. Maybe they'll actually let him talk to somebody. But from their point of view, the mayor of Fairview and the president of the church, or even whoever the heck, who is the ultimate decision maker? It's got to be President Nelson.
I don't even know that. I think it's God. I mean, that's what they keep telling all the residents. God chose the site. God chose the design, the height of the steeple. I think it's God.
Well, he'll have to travel to Salt Lake to meet with God.
He will.
Because that's where God lives.
That's where he dwells. Yes, in the house of the Lord, which
so
is
I think this is
temple.
Politically speaking, I think this is a very good move on the mayor's part.
The only thing I'm sitting there thinking, if the church takes this to court, let's say they win. Let's say the highest of the courts is just going to fall, come down in the position that it does not matter. It does not matter what point you try to argue. Religions have full ability to do whatever the hell they want, whenever they want. You will bankrupt in part this city, right? They'll spend umpteen, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not million, $1 million or $2 million. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That you will bankrupt the city. Could the church, when the whole thing is said and done, let's say the church takes it to court, they win, city spends $1 million, whatever, to handle the proceedings. And then could the church just back out and go, you know what, on second thought, we don't want to build it all in your town? Because what the city services will have, the way the city would have to operate is it would then have to cut cost, and this wouldn't be the kind of city that the church would want to be. And while you guys were talking, I put into AI art, I asked it to show me an LDS temple with tons of homeless people around. If the city was sort of not the greatest place to be anymore, does the church want its temples to be in a place, and how would the rest of the citizens react forever towards the church, towards this temple, if they do this whole act of suing the city, costing the city, whatever it is, millions of dollars, and then the city ends up losing in the end? I think this is not going to be good no matter where it goes.
I think that's a great insight. And I think the church has to worry not only about what non-members are saying, but even what members are saying. Is that right, Rebecca?
That's it. And that segues right into my next section here. And really, Bill, you do not need to use AI to generate tent cities around a temple. If you go downtown Salt Lake, I was just there last week, that's what's happening. It's such a juxtaposition. It's actually horrifying. So You're right on point here, RFM. What do faithful LDS think? And I've been monitoring this and all the temples, and part of that is looking to see what the faithful think by reading social media, going on temple support sites, things like that. And I have definitely seen a shift as things just kind of drag on. And even in Fairview, I have seen a shift. So I'm just going to read a couple of these because I think it's really interesting. And I keep saying we podcast, it's not post-Mormon. We're also podcasting for faithful members who are collateral damage in all of these processes, because a lot of them are having to do things and act in ways to so-called support the temple that they normally wouldn't. And they're starting to see it, and some vocally voice it. So here's somebody on faithful social media who said, used to be the church would bend over backwards to be a good neighbor. They say that all the time. I want to be a good neighbor, and make sure things were copacetic behind the scenes before presenting formal plans that were almost certainly going to cause contention. It's like the 11th, 12th, and 13th articles of faith are being reinterpreted so we can get our way because of religious freedom and the so-called religious oppression in the United States. I'm active, a regular temple worker of more than a decade, and I really care much more about showing my neighbor love, compassion, and understanding to aid in their conversion and salvation, not in fulfilling some architect's plan that clearly violated existing zoning laws. I mean, how many will turn missionaries away because of this? Is this contention worth one soul missing out on the fullness of the gospel?
Great question.
This person sees it, right? A missionary in Cody, a missionary in Heber, a missionary in Fairview, a missionary in Lone Mountain. It's going to be a tough road if you open that and read that as your call.
Apparently the answer is a lot, because this contention is worth a lot of souls missing out on the fullness of the gospel.
Yeah. And so I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then, and this was a thread that had maybe 100 comments, and almost everyone seemed to have just a little nuance to it, or confusion, or maybe like, this has gone on long enough. Here's some other ones. I agree. I'm confident God doesn't care how tall a temple is. He cares about what happens inside, as stated by Elder Bednar and President Nelson.
Yes. In other words, the leaders of the church say it doesn't matter how high the temple is, but somehow there's this new doctrine.
There's a new doctrine. This is a waste of time. Just lower the height. These are faithful people saying this. Amen. Whatever side of the issue one comes down on, the objective truth is that the church's goodwill has taken a huge hit for no clear upside. Would have been far better to simply propose a more realistic design up front, right? One that fits in with the zoning codes. Indeed, this isn't the Middle Ages. We do not need towering cathedrals as flexes of wealth and power.
Wow.
I'm telling you, the faithful get it. They really do, because these are our friends and our family.
This is the faithful member saying this.
Yeah, this is from a very faithful Reddit site.
Wow.
You could make a temple look like a Soviet apartment building, and it would not change what happens inside. Again, stated by Bednar and President Nelson over and over. It's what is inside that matters.
It's like the new Brussels temple.
Like Brussels, exactly.
Soviet apartment building.
If that ever gets built with its rooftop garden. Another person says, I can't upvote this enough. So many people saying this is religious discrimination because we're not provided an exemption. The facts are that another church was granted an exemption and they didn't build it. Talking about that bell tower again. Mm-hmm. The fact that our building is already the tallest, their stake center, just shows that there is no religious discrimination. And someone else says, just dust your feet and build it outside the city limits or in a nearby town that sees the benefit of having a temple. So that's kind of a backhanded way. But I was very surprised. And again, as I monitor this throughout the last year, it's really trending this direction. Mm-hmm. Of course, then you have people like this who say, good, they should take Fairview to court. They should win. They should go back to the original blueprint, the much taller one. The church has compromised a lot for this temple, only for the city of Fairview to keep backing out and not argue in good faith. This isn't an issue of the church being a bully. Misinformed members here, and quite frankly, ex or non-members cosplaying as faithful members. So this person can't even fathom that a faithful member might have a more charitable view of the whole situation. This person is accusing those, comments that I just read of being ex-Mormons or non-members.
It's the no true Mormon fallacy.
I think that's what it is. Let's see, would have people believe the church shouldn't just roll on its back and leave. They've done absolutely nothing wrong. This is a religious liberty issue that needs to be fought tooth and nail in the courts, and it looks like it will be. The mayor and the city council of Fairview screwed around, were openly hostile and biased. Now they can find out the consequences of their actions. So, that point of view still exists too, but I am extremely encouraged to see the other point of view. So we'll see. The mayor wants to come to Salt Lake and he wants to talk to somebody. And I know that I think is going to be doing interviews with different news sources about this offer to come to Salt Lake. And for all we know, he may just come out here. Who knows? He could tour the newly opened section of Temple Square, and he could sit in the church office building and see if anybody would come down and talk to him. Maybe he could have lunch with Aaron Sherinian. Anything could happen. It's going to be really interesting to watch. Any final thoughts on Fairview before I move on to Lone Mountain?
Have you thought about reaching out to him for an interview?
You know, the stuff that I do is under wraps and I cannot comment right now.
That's
so
a definite
we'll
yes.
see. I'm so coy about things, aren't I? That's right. Any final thoughts on Fairview, Bill?
No, I'm just disgusted.
Yeah, I know.
Watching the previous story and this one.
Exactly. When you put it all together like that, that's what I mean. They all kind of flow into each other. And it's just this hot mess of, oh, come on, guys, we can do better. So let's move on quickly to, there is some news out of Lone Mountain in the Vegas area. The temple, of course, plans are in. It's going to be 196 feet tall. It is a gigantic, it is huge.
That's taller than Fairview.
Oh yeah, no, this is the biggest one of all the ones that we covered. This is absolutely a monster temple, and it is going to be built. It's all the way through, and the planning commission, the zoning commission said yes. There was a lawsuit. It was dismissed.
Yeah.
We talked about that, I think, last week. But here's a very interesting thing that came up. It says planned LDS temple in Las Vegas faces limits on light. I put the picture over at lighten. It's lighting is what it's trying to say. So super interesting. A Las Vegas dark sky ordinance approved this month would limit how much light an upcoming Northwest Valley Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints temple can emit at night. The law, affirmed on February 5th, City Council meeting, doesn't specifically mention the controversial project being built near Lone Mountain. However, it exclusively applies to its rural Lone Mountain neighborhood and in the, let's see, sorry, my slides are like disappearing, La Madre foothills area, according to the city. So yes, the temple would be impacted by this. And what does this new ordinance say? Well, super interesting to me. First of all, it says the lighting cannot exceed 4,000 Kelvin. I believe other temples, it does exceed that. I don't know a lot about Kelvin. Maybe someone in the chat can clue us in, but definitely have to be dimmed down. Here's the one I find extremely interesting. No lights above 35 feet. No lights above 35 feet. What? That is so interesting to me. A required light shielding,
But the lights can still be lower than that 35 feet and be pointing upward against the structure, right?
No, and this is what we're going to talk about, the loopholes, the workarounds, but as it's meant to be, no light that shines above 35 feet and finally turned off between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. That's not going to work, right? So I was fascinated. I've been talking to people in the area to see what they think. A lot of people think loopholes and, whatever's going to happen. So interesting from the article, it says the church, which often refers to light as a religious symbol, does it? I don't know if it does. I think that's a little clue there on how they might deal with it, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's obvious, right? Christmas
It is
tree
obvious.
lights.
I'm
They've been doing
stating
this
the
for
obvious.
100
I
years.
know. Had planned to illuminate the temple 24 hours a day. The church in a statement said it was aware of the ordinance and will comply. Well, there you go. So this is a temple. This is not the Lone Mountain Temple. It has not begun construction yet. It's a temple of a similar size. And I just wanted to see what it would look like if it was illuminated to 35 feet. I think that's kind of interesting, don't you?
Where is that temple? Yes, it is. I'm sorry. It is very interesting. I was going to say, where's that temple? It looks like a background mat in the original Star Trek TV show.
It does kind of, doesn't it? Yeah. I can't remember which one this is, but I picked one that had a similar size and height. So, okay. So obviously there's no way they're not going to light it up to the top. That's the point of the temple, like the picture there in the lower left. And so what I can see is what you said, maybe the lights are affixed at 35 feet and then shine up. Maybe they can use that, some kind of loophole there. I kind of think we all remember the steeple doctrine, right? And when they need to use RLUIPA or some other religious workaround, they have to prove that what they want to do is the most important part of what they want to build. So when they wanted to build a tall steeple, they sent letters to their members and said, you got to mention how important the steeple is to us. We can't do what we do without it. That became Steeple Doctrine Gate. That brought Nemo from all the way from the UK to come and talk to Fairview and say that's not a thing. I'm going to go on record right now and predict the lighting doctrine is coming, right? Pillar by day, fire by night. I can just see it now.
I am the light and the life of the world. We got it in Doctrine and Covenants 93. We got it everywhere.
Yep. Don't help them, RFM.
They don't need any help. All they have to do is just go to a little search.
Exactly. Anyway, I'd like everybody to watch out for the lighting doctrine, because I feel this is going to be something that the fact that it's lit is an integral part of our worship. And we'll see if that happens. So it's interesting there. I've been talking to a couple different people that live there, and this is really interesting. This picture one of them sent me, this is a stake center where the light poles have been cut down. And it's been this way for about 10 years, this person said. And it looks like there were some lighting ordinances there, and the church did comply. They literally sliced their light poles off. So I don't know. I'm trying to find out more about this, but I just thought this was a really interesting picture, because this is a stake center that's pretty dark, because their lights have been sliced off for about the last decade.
But those light poles are coming out of the sidewalk, right?
They're coming out of the sidewalk. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure what they...
Which seems like an issue on its own. Don't sidewalks have to be a certain width and allow for like disabled people and whatnot to be able to travel them?
You would think. I just thought it was a really interesting picture that maybe shows that the church is intending to comply. I don't know. And then, of course, I came across this post. It was somebody who lives in Lone Mountain. This is a gorgeous picture of Lone Mountain right there. It's just this mountain. It's just this, this landmark that's there. And of course, the church looked at it and said, aha, I know what'll look much better there. So this person writes,
I know what would look great in front of that mountain.
Exactly. I know what'll look great. So this person says, I get to enjoy this view taking my daughter to school. There's going to be a big building right here blocking this view in the future. I'll enjoy it while it lasts. Okay. So different people weighed in, of course, on the thread. And this comment I'm going to read is from one of the local church leaders. And this person says, only if you zoom in, lucky enough for all of us, the sky is large and expansive, and the views will continue to be seen just fine. It's a little silly to act like the big building you speak of will block all the scenery. My guess is you will never not be able to enjoy the view. And the picture is really cool. Thanks for sharing. So people just don't get it. On my drive to and from Thrive, because it was in St. George and I came from farther north, I can't even tell you how many temples I drove past. Here's the Payson Temple. And, this is a mountain here in a mountain range. I'm sorry, but having something ginormous lit up, that's it. The view, the natural look and feel of it is just gone. So we'll continue to follow, but it'll be really interesting to see about the lighting in Lone Mountain. I think that's pretty fascinating. Our next temple. One last thing I forgot to mention. What was that?
Temples. You were seeing all those temples. It's like you were spotting raccoons right and left.
I was. Did you ever play that game as a kid? Spot the license plate. If I would have had a temple bingo card, I would have filled it up just on I-15 for like 10 miles. I'm not kidding.
Yeah. It's just amazing how many temples there are. Obviously, they're all needed and they're all running day and night to do those endowments.
Are they? Okay. Anyway, one last thing about Lone Mountain. This person had this idea and they posted this on social media. If anyone is in Vegas, we will be planting continuous gay flags on Lone Mountain for the open house and the dedication day. The community dissents. So their idea is once the temple's built and people flock to it for the open house and the dedication. This mountain is very hikeable. Lots of people talk about how much they love hiking up it and just looking out over the natural vista. Of course, now it's going to be like this looking out and then record scratch temple right there. So they're going to put a pride flag up there. And
continuous gay flags all the way up and along it. That'd be a lot of flags.
What they want is your eye to go up and then over and go, oh, interesting. So
that's the unfortunate corollary to the spire doctrine.
That's exactly right. That's it. The doctrine of the spire, the doctrine of the lighting. And the last temple I'm going to talk about very quickly is again lighting. This is Cody. Oh my goodness. We talked about how they had their case heard before the Wyoming Supreme Court. The decision is probably months out. RFM always tells us it'll take, 4 months, 2 months.
That's the deal. Is attorneys have to do things by deadlines. Judges, nobody can really put a deadline on them.
Exactly.
They're the judge.
Exactly. But in the meantime, the church has been given a permit by the city of Cody to build. Now, it could happen with all the rulings. If things get sent back down, they might have to tear it down. But in the meantime, they're going to build this thing as fast as humanly possible. And I would like to put out to everybody out there, have you ever heard of a temple construction site where they work through the night? I haven't. And I've asked a lot of people, but this is what is happening in Cody. They are working at night. And this is a picture of, they kind of refer to it as a small city. Let's see if I can go to the next slide here. Yeah, it says, this picture was snapped at 3 a.m. Wednesday morning. 3 a.m. Wednesday morning. The work is going on all night long, fabricating the structure components, lifting them into place during the day. At night, it's a city unto itself. We are watching the equipment moving items around the site from where built to where the crane can reach them. We have seen flashes of a welding torch, and the steel boxes or railings are seen the next morning lifted into place by the on-site crane. The tall box at the top will be joined by 3 others like it to form the next segment of the layer cake tower. We have noise and nuisance ordinances, as most towns do. But it's strange because those are usually in commercial zones. You don't often see this kind of construction project in a residential zone. So it's kind of unclear about the noise and nuisance ordinances. Neighbors have submitted written complaints with photos, videos. The city official responding says, I'm saying that the Cody Police Department ought to be contacted. Then we're told that the police department sent an officer out who sounded like he might take action, but nothing changed. Now it looks like the city is saying talk to the police. The police are saying talk to the city. The bottom line is this is going on every night in a very residential neighborhood. This is a letter, and maybe I'll have you read it, RFM, because I got this very late. This was
they need to get a lawyer and go to court and ask for an injunction against the church to make them stop
there you
doing
go.
that if they want anything to happen.
There you go. But can you read this? This is a resident, and this is kind of an amalgam. These things are taken from many resident statements that I'm aware of. But this one just came in right before Newscast, so I don't have it printed out. Could you read this? To me, this kind of breaks my heart. You know, someone in their own home and what they're going through.
Yeah, I noticed that house that was right there. I think it was the Brady house in front. See there with the garage? Yeah. They got a great view of that temple when it's finished.
And they're so excited about it.
All right, here's your slide. As the sun sets, the lights become brighter. I can't stand in my own living room or soon to be kitchen.
I think they're remodeling their home or something like that. And this picture right here is taken from inside someone's home. Look at that.
This looks like a scene out of Close Encounters.
It does.
Okay, so I got my own kitchen. Without sustaining a headache from the lights in my window after even a short while, I walk outside after a long day's work and hear the hum of trucks and generators. I'm woken in the morning by the generators and sounds of construction through my open window. Well, close your window. The open window, it's an important feature. Of temperature regulation in this home, and has never been a problem until now. Yeah, until I started making all the noise over there. Sure. This project is disturbing my peace in my own yard, my own living room, my own bedroom, even after the hours of what would be considered a normal work day. Can you please remind me of the hours light is allowed to be shed across the property line and into the windows of my home? Who is this to? The city?
These are examples of what people are writing to the city.
Okay.
Asking if they can have some relief. Are there any, zoning codes or ordinances that can protect them from this in the middle of the night, bright light shining into their home and noise? And also diesel fumes from generators is what they're talking about.
Oh, yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah.
That's terrible. Yeah. Relief may be spelled RELIEF, but relief is definitely not spelled MORMON.
Yes.
Another person writes, what are the hours the construction noise is allowed?
Mm-hmm.
And then please help me regain peace, health, and the feeling of security within the bounds of my own property. The current disturbances caused by this project are unacceptable.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's not just one or two residents. Everybody around there is being impacted. And I have been made aware of the ordinances involved around, construction and that kind of stuff. And again, it's this construction happening in residential. Typically, you don't have people building houses all night. It's not an issue. And so what it is you have to, between the hours of 8:30 at night and 6:30 in the morning, you're not supposed to be working, as I understand it. You're not supposed to be, obviously security lights. Everybody knows that on a construction site, but crane lifting, welding, generators, diesel, that's not supposed to be happening. So the residents are trying to get some help. And it seems like one of them expressed to me, they kind of felt like maybe the city was a little afraid of the church or causing waves or something, because don't forget, the church is going to join the city in the lawsuit brought by their own residents against them. So I don't know. I just feel really bad that's happening for them. And I have a couple more pictures just so you can get an idea. This is, I think, a few of the closer houses. And someone in the comments is mentioning if you've ever had to live near a construction zone, it's bad. I mean, it really wears on your mental health. So
this is a big project.
Huh?
This is a big project.
It's a big project. And here's the thing. They are going nonstop at it. And my co-host Landon thinks, and others do, that they just want to get it done as fast as humanly possible.
Apparently.
Working through the night, because say the Wyoming ruling goes against the church, but the city issued a permit. Could the church sue the city and say, hey, you issued us a permit. Now you got to pay our expenses for taking this down.
I don't think that's going to be a winning argument, because the church is, there's a basic rule that you can't make the damages worse by your own dumb actions. Excuse me. You can't make.
I thought you were going to say something else.
Yeah, you can't increase your damages. If a person hits you, you can't increase your damages by going and being in a boxing match. That's a very basic example, okay? But funny. You can't make your own damages worse and then claim that the other side has to pay you for the damages that you increased by your own negligence or whatever. This isn't even negligence. This is just intentional.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
and that makes sense.
They should just be sitting still. I'm sorry, Rebecca.
Yeah.
They should just be sitting still and not doing anything.
Yeah.
That would be the normal, that would be the reasonable thing to do. And if they came along and said the city has to pay us now because we didn't do the reasonable thing, and we just said, we think we're going to win this, so we're going to build the whole thing. Well, those are costs you're going to have to bear, LDS Church. I think most judges would say.
Yeah, we're trying to figure it out, because I think this is moving along. Remember the stealth groundbreaking where they just zoomed in and zoomed out, brought their potted plants in, took them out? Everything's happening at a very rapid pace. And I wish anyone would comment and let me know, have they ever heard of a temple being built at night? It was funny. I tried to tell some of them, get out of bed at like 2:00 on Sunday morning and see if they're working on the Sabbath. Oh, yeah. I haven't gotten that information yet, but wouldn't that be interesting if they were? So they're just putting it together lickety split, and it may be finished by the time that Wyoming ruling comes out and says, take it down. I don't know.
I have never seen a temple built at night, but I would love to see a brand new temple destroyed by day.
There you go. RFM
taken down. It's got to be taken down.
There it is. Anyway, here are just a few last pictures during the day. You can see the homes and the temple. What a lovely view, right? You can see the gorgeous Cody landscape back there. There's a home and the lovely view. So anyway,
if you have a mind to move, and I'm not saying it because, if you're going to stay there and you're not a Mormon, you're probably not going to like it. But among a certain class, it's going to raise your property value. Faithful Mormons want to have that. Yeah, sorry. I know it involves moving, but sometimes...
it involves moving. Otherwise, you're just going to have a higher property tax. That's what nobody figures out. So, and as we talked about last week, don't forget, they've applied the person who donated the land has applied for an R2 designation to allow, like a condo type, duplexes or more single family to develop the land around the temple, which kind of goes back to what you were talking about, doesn't it, RFM? So anyway, it's all hand in hand. It really is. And it ties into even what, Bill is going to talk about next. So interesting.
Thank you so much for the reporting on that story and stories, Rebecca. Bill, take us home.
All right. So the Pew Research Center, by the way, if you're gonna sell your house and move, my hunch is you should wait till the temple is built and then advertise that your home is sold for sale in highly Mormon areas in Utah and in Idaho, and try to draw somebody close to the temple who will overpay for your house. Don't sell it now. All right. Pew Research Center came out with a bunch of research over the last week, and several people posted articles on it. And there's the articles are in lots of different directions. Some articles were claiming that Christianity is no longer sort of sliding down and less folks. Mormonism wants to claim that the nuns is sort of decreased, and the statements in the various articles say lots of different things. So this one was from CNN. Americans decreasingly call religion important to their lives and are divided over its role in society. NPR says Christianity declines among U.S. adults while the religiously unaffiliated grows, the study says. Deseret News, interesting enough, had an article that covered how the decline in Christianity has plateaued, but Mormonism isn't mentioned in the article at all. And then Axios out of Salt Lake City says PEW, Utah's religious nuns rise, Christianity, including Mormonism, declines. So
how is it that all these articles are saying that the nuns or the non-religious are increasing, but the Deseret News says it's plateaued, and not only that, it plateaued 5 years ago? Those seem to be different conclusions.
They're partially true and partially not. So I'm here to help you sort that out. I'll just note some images that have come out in the last week to sort of describe what this PEW Research does say. Muslims projected to be the fastest growing major religious group. So much for that being a facet of the one true and living church with which the Lord is well pleased.
God likes Muslims.
Yeah, it looks like they will have the majority of the growth when it comes to religions over the next umpteen years. They say from 2015 to 2060. After years of decline, the Christian share of the U.S. population stabilizes. So this is in part what they're pointing to.
Yeah.
Back in 2007, the United States, 78% of folks reported being Christian. That dropped down to about 60 a couple of years ago and has risen back up to 63. So 63% of the U.S. population just self-labels as Christian. Then you get...
That's still a huge percent. Obviously, it's down from where it was.
Mm-hmm.
That's still a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of these folks, I should say a lot, a significant number of them are not church-going folks. That continues to go down, the folks who are actively involved in their Christian church, for instance. But the majority of people who don't go to church anymore are still labeling themselves as God-believing and in many instances still as Christian.
Okay, so the thing that's plateaued for the last several years is just self-identification as Christian.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So U.S. religious groups, again, 62% label themselves as Christians, 29% religiously unaffiliated, and other religions, 7%. So that gives you an idea of sort of how the country divides themselves up. Stability in religious identity since 2020. So this is just the last few years. Again, Christian went all the way down from 64% in 2020 down to 60% in 2022 when it was at its low, and then back up to 62, 63%. And then the religiously unaffiliated, 28 is a high of 31 and back down to 28%. So it seems like since 2020, since COVID and that the incredible things that happened that year, that we end up sort of plateauing. This big decline and increase in the nuns, this big decline in religiosity, seems like it's sort of flattened out. A share of U.S. adults identifying as Christian is down since 2007, but it has held steady in recent years. And then the same thing with the unaffiliated. You can see sort of where one went down, one went up, and they both have sort of plateaued. And then intermarried adults. I think this one's an interesting one to Mormonism. When you see Mormon leadership making it a big deal that you marry inside the church and you divorce, on some level, there is pressure, and the Council of Bishops and other leaders who suggest at times that divorce is should be the chosen result for a mixed faith marriage. And so we've had that bad advice sort of go out. You can see why they would like that. Intermarried adults tend to be less religious. So mixed faith couples tend to be less religious than those married to a person of the same religion. So all you have to do is follow the data and go, why would Mormon leadership want people to get married to folks in the faith and to divorce if that person loses their testimony? That right there tells you why. 52% of Americans say science does more good than harm in society. 7% say it does more harm than good. The rest of the population's just neutral on whether science is a good thing or not.
So we're about to find out what a bad thing is science is.
That's crazy. Well, okay. So long-term decline, this is just being reiterated, same thing. So here are my takeaways from the data. So you can go read all the articles. They all sort of point in different directions. Here's the takeaways. Stabilization of Christian identification. After years of decline, the percentage of U.S. adults identifying as Christian has stabilized between 60 and 64% since 2019, currently standing at 62%. Rise of the religiously unaffiliated. The proportion of Americans identifying as religiously unaffiliated has increased from 16% in 2007 to 29% in 2024, but that has also plateaued. Generational differences. Only 46% of adults aged 18 to 29 identify as Christian, compared to 80% of those 74 and older, indicating a significant generational shift. That tells you that things will change drastically, assuming that those 46% of adults between ages 18 and 29 don't suddenly become religious. That's a big change in perceptions, motivations, how you form arguments around issues. That will make a big difference as time goes on and that older generation dies off. Utah's religious landscape. In Utah, 34% of residents identify as religiously unaffiliated, up from 22% in 2014, while the proportion of Latter-day Saints has declined from 55% to 50% over the same period. So it's a slow decline, but it is declining. So when the church claims that it is growing, recognize that in the very state at which it is headquartered, that is untrue. It is going down, and indicators in other places across the country indicate that similar things are happening. And then the last...
Okay, one thing I don't understand, Bill.
Please.
You're going to have to explain this to me.
Yes.
Because when the numbers went down drastically of Mormon membership in California, the explanation was that they were moving to Utah. What the hell's going on?
If
Utah's going down too?
They
Are
were.
moving to
A lot
California?
did.
Yes. If they're moving to Utah, they're becoming inactive in the process. So lots of Californians are coming to Utah. Not all of them are members. In fact, most of them probably aren't. So even if the church were to grow in pure numbers, they might actually go down in percentage just because of that shift of people moving from California to the state of Utah. And then the last one, political and religious affiliation among self-identified liberals. 51% are religiously unaffiliated, up from 27 in 2007, while 37% identify as Christian, down from 62 in 2007. I don't have the stats on conservatives. This was just one that one of the articles mentioned. I don't have the other side of that. Sorry about that. A couple other things. Religious switching. Approximately 35% of U.S. adults have switched from the religion in which they were raised, contributing to the growth of the religiously unaffiliated population. Belief in God and morality. 68% of Americans believe it is possible to be moral and have good values without believing in God, while 30% say belief in God is necessary for morality. And I'll just say, if you need God to be moral, I'm really scared of you. If for some reason you stop believing in God, that makes me really nervous. Age and religious affiliation. The median age of Christians has risen from 46 in 2007 to 55 in 2024. We talked about that stat earlier. The 74 and older crowd is really where the belief is still at a high number. Everyone else is significantly lower. Belief in spiritual concepts. Despite declines in formal religious affiliation, 83% of Americans believe in God or a universal spirit, and 70% believe in an afterlife. I want to know about the 13% who believe in God but don't believe there's an afterlife. There's an interesting conversation to be had. And then lastly, religious service attendance. 33% of U.S. adults report attending religious services at least once a month. That's so low, really. When you, in the scheme of the data of people claiming belief, put your money where your mouth is. Only 33% of U.S. adults report attending a religious service at least once a month. So that has remained pretty stable over several years. And then this will be, I think, the think the second to last slide. So how have changes in the religious affiliation sped up or slowed down? I won't read all of this, but I'll just read the main heading. Christianity's decline has slowed, but it is still declining. So it's plateaued, but still with a slight curve or slight trajectory down. The nuns boom is losing some steam, so the nuns have plateaued as well. Younger generations are driving long-term change. Again, it's the young people of the world who see the world very differently than the older crowd, and that's going to impact lots of various ways in which religion can act and how it will form arguments around those issues. So that is yet to see. And then lastly, LDS membership reflects broader Christian trends. So it's not like the church is some unique thing claiming to be the one and only true church with which the Lord is well pleased. Its trajectory is in line with religion generally. What this data tells us, the shift away from organized religion isn't stopping, but it's dramatically slowed. The early 2000s saw rapid disaffiliation, especially post-2010, likely fueled by access to information online, religious scandals, and the shifting of cultural values. Now, we may be in a transitional phase, a moment where the biggest wave of deconstruction has already happened, and future change will be more gradual. So I think for everybody in this space of post-Mormonism, especially I think content creators, this data seems to indicate that we are past that peak of people sort of figuring out that their religion isn't true, deconstructing and walking away. The high numbers of that in years past may have sort of plateaued at this point. Not that it's gone down, just that we shouldn't expect anything super crazy to happen in this realm over the next few years. Final takeaway, the biggest question is what happens next? Will organized religion find a way to adapt and stabilize, or is this just a temporary pause before the next wave of decline? One thing is clear, young people are shaping the future, and their disinterest in traditional faith isn't reversing anytime soon. The institutions that survive will be ones that evolve or learn to exist with a much smaller, more committed membership. And you see in recent years, the LDS Church beginning to adapt this way, creating their regulation around what numbers are required to create wards and stakes, they've lowered. And they have, in some ways, left trying to proselyte to as much to the developed countries where the decline is most significant, and focus their energy and resources in developing countries where they seem to still have some significant growth happening. So there is that.
When you had said takeaways earlier, I thought you meant to us, but you're reading your slide. I think that LDS Church, it's okay. I think the LDS Church is its own special case, because I don't know of any other church out there, and I don't know them all, but I don't know of any other church out there that has gone to such lengths to hide its past and the negative stuff about it and the stuff that proves it's not true, while promoting this whitewashed, correlated, faith-promoting version of it to the members. And so I think that the opportunities are still legion for faithful members to find out that the church that they have given everything to and trusted implicitly and explicitly with their entire lives has been lying to them, and has been hiding information from them, and hasn't been telling them how much money they have and where that money is going and why it's being hoarded and why it's not being spent, and yet why they're continuing even this past Saturday at stake conferences across the country. And I have information about at least two of them. You know, your little area 70, go there, and they are preaching tithing. They are hitting that tithing hard, hard, hard. You need to stretch yourselves thin for the Lord. You need to pay your tithing. And so they're just beating the drums. Also about not listening to anybody else, not researching your questions, because the answers don't come from research. If you have doubts or questions about the church, you need to just read the Book of Mormon. You need to read General Conference. You need to go to church. You need to pay tithing. And that's how your answers will come, not from any kind of research into the actual issue itself. So it continues on out there about this wanting more and more tithing. And I think that, getting back to the main point, is as long as the church goes to such lengths to misrepresent itself to its members, I think that there's still going to be tons and tons of people coming to the realization that that's what is happening and leaving the church as a result.
Can I add one more thing to this, which is I'll put it back up on the screen. I'll just as a comparable to Scientology, because Scientology puts the front on of being really successful. Mormonism does that. Scientology hides its history. You have to pay so much money and get to like the 172 level of Scientology before they share with you the full scope of the theology. At least in Mormonism, you can go to the temple after a year of being a member, right? So Scientology, this one I don't take put too much weight in. Once thriving Church of Scientology faces extinction, says Cult Tracker, not sure what that is, but it talks about like one of the members, what they had to say. But this is Mike Render, who's a former high up in Scientology, the shrinking world of Scientology. He mentions how their money is going up, but their membership is going down because of how they conduct business. Here's another one. Scientology is shrinking fast and getting richer. And you can, on some level, see that at least geographically in certain portions, including Utah, like we talked about, the church is getting wealthier. That seems to be what it values. Its numbers are getting smaller, but it portrays to the general public that its numbers are growing, that it's huge, that it's the best thing possible in terms of growth. And one has to wonder, in high demand fundamentalist religions, how much you can trust the entity that's telling you about their dramatic and significant growth.
I think it has to pretend growth just to justify its dragon's hoard, right? And the religious privilege that it enjoys, that it allows it to continue to grow this kind of hoard where other corporations can't. The religious arm, it's a small part of what the corporation's soul is. And they're losing members, of course, but they have to keep up that illusion to justify what they're doing on the corporate side. And this, what you just discussed, actually, both of you kind of mirrors what John DeLynn gave as the State of the Union address at Thrive. He always does that every year. And he definitely talked about that. He talked about the membership and how growth in Africa is a mask for everything else that's declining. And, that's not sustainable either. Also, as people kind of learn truth claims and things like that. But he did a really interesting survey right there on the spot. We all scanned a barcode, and it was about sort of Christianity in post-Mormonism. Questions like, how many of you still believe in the soul or the spirit? And everybody kind of, it was a good like 28% of people there at a post-Mormon conference. And these are going to be the uber diehards because we went to St. George and we paid money and we're there. A lot of us believed in a spirit or a soul. There were questions about the afterlife. There were questions about a higher power or a God. So even leaving a organized religion doesn't necessarily mean that you're still not a spiritual person. And you might say, I'm a Christian. So those numbers may not necessarily track with Mormonism or anything else. But I'll just say the final thing, I saw this meme the other day. I thought it was so good. It said, if Christians are right, then 5.1 million people are going to hell. If Muslims are right, 5.5 million people are going to hell. If I'm right, nobody's going to hell. I like that much better.
Well, that's a glasses half full kind of way of looking at it. I was buying up space in hell to rent it out for eternity.
Well, that is a money-making venture. People do try to sell pieces of real estate in heaven. It does happen.
So I'm doing it in hell. This is my version of, what is it? Is it Pascal's wager?
Yes.
I'm betting on hell.
You're going to go for hell all the way. There you go. That's it.
Was that everything you had to say on that story tonight, Mr. Real?
That is everything.
Okay, I think we have one more little one, from me. Okay, so this is, and I'll be quick about this. Malaysia's Mormons deny I can't even say the word somebody say it for me. Proselytization. Somebody corrected me in the chat. I'm trying to say it. They're proselytizing. Accusation. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints says that videos were media misrepresentations of its young volunteers. So basically, you're not supposed to proselytize in some of these countries. And some missionaries.
Mormon missionaries. Who would ever think they would proselytize?
Well, the church says absolutely not.
No
it's
way.
Not happening. That's what they're saying. It's not happening at all. So I have a little quick video here, and I have to say, when I watched
by the way, if Elder Ballard were still with us, he would also be saying, I have no idea where the missionaries got this idea of challenging investigators to baptism on the first discussion. When it's the church who's doing it. It's in the missionary discussions.
No, I love that. It reminds me
Don't
of
try
when
and get me to think these guys were proselytizing without direction to do so.
You can say it so clearly. I just can't seem to say it. No, it reminds me of, I think it was Ballard also who said, oh, isn't it great? Our missionaries are finally learning how to use technology. And everyone's like, are you kidding me? You told us for decades that we couldn't use technology. And now they're saying, oh, it's so nice that our members have learned how to celebrate Easter. You told us we couldn't. And now you're telling us we are. But as I watched this video, I just feel so sorry for these little guys. I know I call them little guys, but I just feel so bad. They're just like on their phone going, President, something's happening. You know, they're just put in this impossible situation. And I really take exception. So let's just play this a little bit and we'll see. But the bottom line is these guys are out there doing what they think they're supposed to do. The church is saying they are not. And the government is saying this is illegal to proselytize to Muslims.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, better known as the Mormon Church, has officially denied that its volunteers have proselytized Muslims in Malaysia. In a statement, it took issue with the harmful misrepresentation of their young volunteers featured in an FMT article recently. It clarified that its volunteers have never engaged in proselytizing Muslims and reiterated its foundational doctrine of obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law. Spokesperson Lee Po Peng said the church has maintained a presence in Malaysia for over 50 years, during which its local members and volunteers continue to uphold the laws of the land and maintain a respectful and peaceful approach in the spirit of religious harmony and unity. In early January, FMT reported that 2 foreigners were confronted by a member of the public after allegedly distributing leaflets on Christianity at Desas Tapa. Police launched an investigation and were reportedly tracking the duo down. In the FMT report on Monday, the Malaysian Consultative Council of Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Sikhism, and Taoism urged authorities to take stern action on another pair of foreigners who allegedly went door to door at a block of People's Housing Program flats to propagate their faith to Muslims.
So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
That doesn't sound like something Mormon missionaries would do.
I know, walking through an apartment complex, knocking on the doors, but it's happened twice. It's happened twice now. And they're calling for deportation of the missionaries. And of course, the church is saying they were not proselyting. Now, I have had a family member that went to a country where you were not allowed to, I'm just not ever going to be able to say the word right. Do missionary work. I know. I think it's because I have Invisalign. Anyway, this family member, they really were told, just go in public places, be friendly. You know, if you stand out, obviously, if somebody comes up to talk to you, you can have a conversation, but no active missionary work. So I know that that is a directive in some places, but to me, it looks like these little guys are just walking around knocking on doors. I don't know. The church makes it sound like, why would you think that? Right?
I know.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the church is saying, I'm shocked to find out that missionary work is going on in Malaysia.
Right. Yeah. But again, these guys are caught in the middle. Poor little guys.
The only thing I'll add is that I can also see a scenario where the church says, don't do that. Mm-hmm. And these guys are like, I'm bored. I was sent on a mission, was sent to Malaysia. My dad and mom are expecting me to share the gospel. And I could see a naive, think you know better sort of missionary going beyond what they've been told to do as well. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes, if there is any follow-up.
Yeah, I think so too. And naive and maybe just overzealous, like you say, and missionaries maybe not thinking it out, right? You know, I know they said this, but I don't think this counts. Let's do this, you know, and I have examples of that too. So
can I say the obvious?
Yeah.
What would we think if Utah passed a law that said that nobody who comes in there gets to share their version of religion, that Mormonism is the state religion? I don't know. We'd probably criticize that.
Probably.
And maybe not without reason. That's all I'm saying.
No, there'd be working arounds like English classes or some kind of tutoring online. That's the kind of stuff that you do, right? You do that
kind of delicate, doesn't it? They're kind of delicate.
You're making the point, RFM, that this country lets in its 4 religions, but everybody else has to stay out, and that doesn't seem fair. Is that the point?
Oh, it's not about fair. It's just like they're so delicate. Jeez. passing out a pamphlet. Call the cops.
Yeah.
Well, you can't be indoctrinated, right? We can't have that. If you're already indoctrinated, we can't have new indoctrination. I think that's it. So I think I have one last slide that was breaking news. It was just so funny.
And
I have to read it.
by the
Yeah.
way, let me use this as a helpful counterpoint, okay? Because this is at one end of a spectrum. It may not be at the far end, but it's toward the end of a spectrum. What's going on in Malaysia, right? Well, we don't have that. And that's a good thing. I think most Americans would think that's a good thing, that we get to share, and have our own religious views, right? And talk about them. But then going toward the other spectrum is this whole religious freedom thing going on here in the United States, right? Which is enshrined in the Constitution. It's getting a bad rap because of perceived abuses of it by people like the LDS Church and their temple building program, among others. But all I'm saying is that if you have to choose between one or the other, which would you choose?
Very good point. Very good. All right. And to tie it all up with a bow, right? This really relates to everybody's story. I think I just thought this was so funny. It was a plea for help cleaning a building for a very special purpose. But whoever wrote this email, I think, really went above and beyond trying to get some help. It says, please view this link as soon as possible. Here is a link to the ward building cleaning assignments. You will be cleaning just the portion of the church we are assigned to clean. The stake has asked for 4 couples clean our part of the building every week in capitals. The first 2 assignments are for this Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. and they are crucial. Also capitalized. The couples assigned to clean Friday will be making sure our church building is ready for a leadership meeting with, a drum roll, Elder Bednar. Cleaning for Elder Bednar. And the Saturday cleaning group will be cleaning up after that meeting. Cleaning up after Elder Bednar, whatever that would entail. I don't know. If you cannot make your assignment, you must, capital, assign another couple to clean in your place. There are no, capital, exceptions. Once you have a couple to clean for you, please let the PFRs in charge, must be somebody, what acronym would that be? I'm not sure, of that week know immediately. Their contact information is on the list. Thank you all for your diligent service in this awesome ward. If you have any questions, please ask either me or your people that are in charge. And then again, there's something really small. I can't even read that at the bottom, but you must assign another couple, meaning you have to replace yourself if you can't do it. And you have to come and clean up for and clean up after Elder Bednar. And I put a weekend in his hand just to see what it would look like. Remember when, do you remember when President Nelson was vacuuming? Do you remember that picture that came out a couple of years ago?
I remember him fishing. He was vacuuming too.
Before that, he was vacuuming. Yeah, because somebody made a meme where he was vacuuming up just piles of money, just like happily. It was really funny.
That kind of picture.
Yeah. So again, with all the wealth, and we don't need to ask for help, and here it is. They make their own members, must, crucial, report. It's pretty crazy, but we all lived it, so it's not unexpected.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep, but it's not a legalistic religion.
No.
But we put your names down, and you have to show up to clean for the apostle.
I know.
Otherwise, you better find somebody who's going to take your spot.
Yeah. What do you think happens to these people in this ward if they don't?
I don't know. Maybe Elder Bednar would never leave.
Dire. Yeah.
That'd be
and
like
I think they do. Yeah. I've seen that used before. The guilt, if we can't achieve this, the apostle may not come. That's definitely used, the guilt trip. So anyway, if this is your ward, anybody, let us know. I thought that was really interesting. I had never seen one like this. I've seen pretty, intense cleaning assignment emails, but this, I think, takes the cake.
That's a great story. Thank you so much for all your stories tonight, Bill and Rebecca. Thanks, everybody, for watching us here on Mormon Newscast. Please join us. Oh, I was going to say, please join us next Monday. It's because we're over the 2-hour mark. Do you want to say something about your show, though, before we sign off for tonight? Rebecca, your show tomorrow night, Mormonish?
Yeah, I think we should all very quickly let everybody know what's coming up. I have a show with a person who for 2 decades has been a facilitator of 12-step programs. She is a recovering addict herself. And we're going to ask the question, is there something wrong with the 12-step programs? Do they do more harm than good? It's pretty fascinating. And this guest is pretty interesting. Her life story and just what she can tell us about 12-step programs.
I've long thought there should be 13 steps myself.
You probably need 13 steps, honestly.
The 13th step is RFM. So that's Mormonish tomorrow night, Tuesday.
6
What
p.m.
time?
6 p.m. Always 6 p.m.
All right. So on Wednesday on Mormonism Live, boy, we got a great show for you folks. Let me just tell you, we got a person who's going to come on the show who's a deep, high-level insider in the Mormon church, in the office building, who's going to come out and spill some major league beans. And this is amazing. I was talking to her last night. She's got some stuff to tell, and it's going to be great. So I just want to let you know that's going to be happening Wednesday, Mormonism Live, 6:20 p.m. on Mountain Time. Right, Bill? And then Friday we'll be doing Mormonism After Dark, mi amigo.
Which is always a good time. So folks, you don't want to miss that. I think it's the funnest, most jovial show in Mormonism happening. So come
It's
check
very
it out.
jovial.
Yep. And listen to Kate on Wednesday. She's going to be amazing.
Yes, that's the insider we're talking about. Okay, so everybody, thanks again. Thanks everybody out there for watching. Please join us next week, next Monday, 6 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time, for the next episode of the Mormon Newscast. Good night, everybody.
Boyd Ginspacker here. That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast. And no matter what they say, I never did touch my little factory.